This is a review of the new RGB SCART cables from Insurrection Industries. These cables went on sale a few weeks ago, so I wanted to check them out, do a quick review, and also use this as an opportunity to revisit how to test your RGB SCART equipment with an oscilloscope and other methods. I recently noticed a new company pop up called Insurrection Industries that was selling RGB SCART cables and a bunch of other cool things. I wanted to do a review of the cable, so I had a friend of mine buy the cable and send it to me because I have trust issues. What can I say? I didn't want somebody sending RetroRGB a review cable. I just wanted to buy it the same way everybody else did. And it shipped the same day, it shipped quickly, and it was packaged right, as you'll see in the unboxing. So right off the bat, good signs. I'm going to be, in this review, doing an electrical analysis of them to make sure that they're safe to use with your RGB SCART equipment. And I'll also do a comparison to one of the other major cable manufacturers, which is a little bit funny because I don't think I've done an official review of the other cable manufacturers that are out there. But to be honest, at this point, they're my go-to cables. And I think the fact that I'm using them as a control test speaks for itself. So we have the newcomer versus at least one of the two of the cable manufacturers that has been out for a while. And if anybody wants more information on these or really any more in-depth info on how to check your cables, what to look for in a cable, shielded versus unshielded, please check out the other videos I did on this last year because I think I don't want to repeat myself in this one, and I think they have a lot of great information in them. But in this video, I'll take the opportunity to do a very quick recap of the testing methods. But for now, let's just jump right in and do the unboxing and go from there. Alright, so let's open the box and see what we got. Okay, so they have their logo stamped on it. Seem like decent quality SNES connectors. Just basic packing peanuts in the box. And since we're here, let's take a look at the inside of the connector itself. So first of all, it doesn't look like all of the individual cables are shielded themselves. It just looks like they're shielding outside of the main cable but not on the individual ones. But they are using the three caps on the RGB lines, and there's a resistor right here for the sync line, which we would have seen the voltage difference if there was not. Soldering quality seems to be okay. I don't see any cold solder joints or anything like that. So overall, just based on build here, it looks like, a typical decently built cable. Before we get into picture comparison tests, I want to check voltage to make sure that these cables are safe to use with all of your SCART equipment. Now, my setup is a SNES 1 chip running into a SCART to BNC cable that's just a pass-through, going into a Rigel DS1054 scope that has the correct 75 ohm terminators on the bottom. And yes, I did test them because they do vary. I'm going to take measurements from both cables and go over each of them very quickly, and I'll see if I can get some of it on screen while I'm doing it. Right now you're seeing live and as it runs the Insurrection cables using an all-white screen, as you should for all RGB cable testing. And let's get down and test the voltage between both this and a known good cable, the RetroGaming cables. That way we could have a good solid control test and make sure that it falls within the correct tolerances. Here's full captures of both the Insurrection cable on the left and RetroGaming cables on the right. I actually was going to go through and do it all in real time, but then I realized most of the video would just be me dialing in the values, so I figured having oscilloscope screenshots should be good enough. But let's just run through really quick and I'll show you the signals for the Insurrection because they lined up almost identically to RetroGaming cables. So you could see red here shows 652 millivolts, but to be honest, I probably just, if I had bumped the dial a tiny bit, it probably would have been 660. And when you're talking about 8 millivolts, you're talking about the tiniest little bit for video signals. Next is green, which is 660, which was spot on with RetroGaming cables. And then same with blue, also 660, and then sync at 534 millivolts. So electrically speaking, they're perfectly safe to use, and they output, as they should, exactly like the known good cables. Now let's take a look at screen captures from both the Retro Gaming and Insurrection cables to see how they compare to each other. My test rig is a Super Nintendo 1-chip 03 with the Voltar RGB bypass in there, the 7374 amp for anybody wondering. The only low-pass filter in the chain is the one in the open source scan converter, which it's being directly plugged into, nothing in between. And then from there, it's going into a DataPath Vision E2S capture card. So for anybody that cares about the capture equipment I'm using, it will not have an effect on any of the setup. Also, I'm capturing using the Vision app in bitmaps, but who knows what's going to happen with YouTube compression. At least what I'm looking at right now is going to be exactly the raw capture that I got. So I'm going to start out with doing a link to the past, and I'm going to zoom into link, because this really is my go-to test in pretty much everything. This is what I use to test all the different console mods, and sometimes cables, although if there's a problem zooming in this far with sharpness in cables, then you know you have an issue. But as you can see, everything is razor sharp along all these edges. You can see around Link's eye, and then even here as the black and gray levels are kind of dissipate out. And the other thing that I like to look at with this is the gray area, or the brownish area up here. If I zoom in as much as possible, you could kind of sort of see in these areas a little bit of, maybe kind of you could describe it as compression artifacts, but it's really just the result of analog to digital conversion, because there's no perfect analog signal out there. And as you can see, we're zoomed in, I don't know, like 200 times or something right now just to be able to even see this. So this is what I would call as good as you're ever going to get out of an analog console, and those were the Retro Gaming cables. So now let's switch over and let's check out the same exact thing from Insurrection. So as you can see, everything is still sharp. Nothing crazy, nothing's way off. There's certainly no colors or edges that are wildly different. And if you scroll up to the flat area, it's pretty much the same amount of analog interference that you're always going to get. Like I said before, there's no way to completely remove this in a pure analog signal, and this is generally not something that you would see even on a 4K calibrated TV. This is really only something you would see zooming in super far just for these comparison tests. And while no, it's not realistic in real-world performance, it certainly does help track down issues in other stuff. But now we'll switch over to Super Mario World and kind of zoom in on that. And I like this because of the blues and the contrast of colors you could see. And once again, much like the Link image, everything's sharp and well defined. The only interference you see in the large flat area is just your standard analog interference. Same with over here. So now let's just do the same thing for the Insurrection cables. And overall, it kind of just looks pretty much the same. Everything's still sharp. There's no major differences. Looking in the flat areas, nothing stands out too much more. So overall, I mean, it looks good. It looks like you would expect. Now let's take a look at some of the pictures side by side just to double check and see if there's anything there that maybe we didn't pick up before. As you can see, here's Link once again with the Insurrection on the left and the Retro Gaming cables on the right. And they look pretty darn close. When zoomed in this far, blown up, and then compressed over YouTube, if something stood out, it would mean that the cables were pretty bad, and nothing stands out, which is a very good sign. And we also have the Super Mario World title screen zoomed into the letters. And once again, as you can see, they're pretty much the same. There certainly isn't any glaring interference on either side. And overall, the new Insurrection cables on the left look like they're performing well. The last thing I wanted to test was the audio output quality of the cables, because on their website they advertise that the stereo audio cables themselves are independently shielded, which I believe that means that the left and right audio cables are shielded separately from the video cables. And if that's the case, it could produce as good a quality audio sound as a fully shielded cable. Now keep in mind though that all analog cables are going to have some kind of hum on them. It's just impossible not to. So if you turn up your volume all the way, you're going to hear something, but with very badly unshielded cables, that noise is very loud and there's even a buzz or hum that's very easy to hear. I tried doing that in one of my last cable compare videos, which I have linked to down below. And unfortunately, the YouTube compression and everything else really made it hard to tell the difference. So I'm going to link to uncompressed waves down below that I captured, so that way you could make your own decision. But in the testing that I did, it sounded pretty much on par with the fully shielded cables. Keep in mind though, I'm plugging these directly into a USB capture card, and a much more real-world scenario would be to have it snagged around with a mess of other wires, behind your TV, in your system racks, just like everything else. So while this is certainly a good direct test, as the video quality comparisons were, your results might vary depending on how crazy your setup is and how much other interference is around you. But check out the links in the description, and overall, I'd say it's certainly not bad quality, that's for sure. And it might be exactly on par with the shielded, as long as you don't have too much other crazy interference going on. Overall, it seems to be a good cable. It passed all the tests I threw at it, and as long as it holds up to the test of time, they should be pretty good. That last one's a bit tricky though, because I've had cables that showed up and looked great right away, and a year later, after all the abuse I put them through, kind of fell apart in my hand, especially that SNES connector part right here. So really, it's just a matter of time to see, because I've had other cables that I've given a very bad beating to over the years that still look and feel and work exactly like the day they arrived. So I guess that one's just a roll of the dice, but so far all the signs are that they're built well. My only other concerns with any new company is that whenever you're trying to make something in bulk like these, things get trickier the more you have to make. So anybody with a little bit of patience and the right components can make a very high quality cable, but try keeping up with demand, try keeping them in stock. So I believe that Insurrection is getting these made professionally in bulk and then reselling them, which is great. I mean, that means that they might be able to ramp up with the demand should it arise. But that's certainly something I've seen over the years, not just in retro gaming, but in the other companies that I've worked with. Sometimes things get popular and people either have to shut off the supply because they can't keep up, which at least is a good sign because they don't sacrifice quality, or they sacrifice quality to spit out as many as they can. So once again, it seems like this cable overall is really well built, and so far it looks good. It's just a matter of will it stand the test of time, and will Insurrection be able to keep up with the demand, whatever demand is brought to them. Well, that's it for this time. If you need more information on which RGB SCART cables are right for you and the differences between them, please check out my other videos as well as the pages on my website, which are all linked to down below. And also, if you liked this video, please consider subscribing to my Patreon, because without my amazing Patreon subscribers, there's no way videos like this could be made. If you liked the channel, maybe consider subscribing and checking out the weekly podcast that keeps people up to date with everything that's going on in the retro gaming scene. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next time.